I grew up in Forest Research Institute, which is like the most beautiful place I've ever lived, I've ever seen to that matter. Did I ever think that there was something else that I had to do? Your scholarship, you get 5,000 every month. So, oh man, it was heaven. I've never enjoyed, anything more in my life than the scholarship, right? You were writing check back those days. Initially, when we started this LUMIQ journey, right? Something was happening in the big data space. This is the time when Shoaib had come back from US, right? He had a stint with NASA, all that was happening.
So good morning everyone. Really proud to be and really privileged to be a part of the first of our leadership engagement series, Beyond the Business. And today was actually supposed to be a leadership conversation between me and Dobi, the co-founder of LUMIQ. But since this is the first of the series, I think we should change tack a bit, and rather than having a conversation, I would like to focus on Dobi. Dobi, welcome to Beyond the Business, and it's a real pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to our interaction and looking forward to the insights, and I'm really sure that all our viewers and listeners are really going to enjoy this inaugural session. So let's roll with it if it's okay.
Thank you, Nitin. As you know, I love to talk, right? And especially with you being on the other side, it's a great opportunity to bounce off ideas. So thank you, and it's a privilege.
Great. I think with all the niceties and introductions done, let's get down to business. So I have a few sets of questions for you, and I'd love to go through them because they actually would give an insight on who you are as a person, what is your professional outlook, what do you think about the various core values and qualities that the young generation should actually emulate or follow or take example or lead from. So let me first put you at ease with a very easy question, and that's, how's the day been treating you today?
Oh, it's been fantabulous. I'm not a morning person. It's still early, but yeah, it's quite good. And of course, the weather has been really nice today. It was a nice drive to office, so liking it, not too bad.
That's great. Good to see that you are on top of spirits. And I liked, the pre-broadcasting, pre-recording session when we were just chit-chatting, and you actually said that your processor takes a little bit of time in warming up in the morning. I guess with our cups of coffee, I think our thoughts have got in them.
Coffee definitely helps.
Yes. So I'm sure there are many viewers and listeners out there who would probably be meeting you for the first time. And I would like to therefore take this opportunity to bring you, your persona, your personality a little closer to our audience. And it would be really nice if you could, in a few lines or a few minutes, share about who you are, how did you grow, and how was your childhood. So that'd be really lovely nuggets of information that our viewers and listeners could probably enjoy.
So there are two parts to that question, right? The first one is, let me quickly introduce myself, and then I'll talk about early years and one of the most cherished part of my life until now, my childhood. So I often describe myself as the data guy, plain and simple, right? Ever since I started, working back in 2004 when I was still a fresher, one thing I understood that, it's a data world, right? Whatever you are doing, at the end of it, you are just manipulating data, right? So there is a business process, everything that happens in a physical world gets mapped to data. Correct? So with that, one thing, initially as part of our first startup, my formative years, we were building, ERPs and everything, but essentially to the core of it, I could separate that, hey, there is business. Business is least interested in IT, applications, data. They have a different mindset that they are working on, right? They are trying to generate business value, plain and simple. Right? And then there is the world of IT, and then there is the world of data. So, what I have been blessed with over these years is to be able to understand and work with all three, right? So what essentially, if I look back and what I do now, there are only two things that I do. One is solutioning. I love that. You give me a business problem, you'll see that, I'm very excited to see, how it can be solved with technology, with process, with whatever, right? And then the mix of, consulting experience over the years. So that's how I describe myself. Currently in LUMIQ, I do three things. So one is, of course, the solutioning. I really love it. The second part is, the marketing is also an area where I'm involved in. And third, of course, when you're a co-founder and you have just completed a decade, you get to understand every area for that matter, every function, right? But yeah, actively those two, and of course, the overall insights about how we are journeying, where is the sense where we are going and everything. So more of strategic planning, thinking and execution, or the way we call it, the CEO office. So those three things are where I spend my time. A longish answer, but to go to the second part of the question, right? My childhood, my early days. So I'm from Dehradun.
Oh, great.
And I grew up in Forest Research Institute, which is like the most beautiful place I've ever lived, I've ever seen to that matter, and including my experience staying all over the world, right? It's a magical place. You have that pristine building at the center of it, and then your whole life is around there. And my dad was a scientist, right? So we grew up there. And now what happened in those formative years is a couple of things. So, there's nobody who's in business in my family.
Okay.
There is nobody who is doing something like that I'm doing, right? So what happened is there are a few things which I remember, of course, there was a focus on doing well in studies and getting past all that checklist, right? So the way I looked at it is, okay, these are prerequisites, these are constraints which must be adhered to. Now what else can be done? That has been over. So I never found it exciting to do something because you just have to do it. So now when I look back, I see it as a curious mind, right? Why this, why that? You don't have to eat non-veg. Why? For example, when it rains, right? Shravan, as we say, right? You don't eat non-veg. Why? So, everything used to go on there. And then, when you have those constraints, how innovation kicks in, right? So now you don't have enough resources because, I don't come from a very lavish background, right? So I still remember those days, okay, you can buy 2 sketch pens. You cannot buy the full 10-pack sketch pen, right? So what you would do is, okay, then you will figure out, okay, I have a red and then I have a green, and you mix it to it becomes black, right? Early days, those are the kind of things that I remember, right? Every time somebody told me that, okay, you have only this much, then the idea was, okay, how can you maximize with what you have, right? And then that whole mindset that we'll figure out. That now when I reflect back, and since you asked this question, those are the things which I believe were formative. And of course, being in a setup where, it was clean, pristine, very well, one of the most well-maintained, historical, and then of course, the whole community of research, scientists. Sometimes you go through things you don't realize what impact do they have, right? But now, when I remember my dad's desk, right, everything was wooden and there were books and everything, and then I remember him writing things, and then you would see this is one research paper, this is another research paper. All that you saw. So what I clearly remember is, since it was a government organization, I never saw my dad not go on time to office and not come back, before time. Now when I look back, what translates it to me is you shouldn't shy away from doing hard work, right?
Yeah.
And if you remember those days, not everybody was, in a government structure it's very different, right? Everything you do doesn't get acknowledged or this thing, right? But then still in that setup, he had it as high, he got a Howard Medal from, President of India and all that stuff, right? So you remember that, there may be a lag, there may be something, but good things happen. So, never shy away from working hard, and all this mindset, all this research, everything, I think it had its own sweet impact. I was not a kid that who would do, break so many rules and everything, but in my mind, I was challenging things. That was my way. So that's how I grew up, and that's where I grew up.
Oh, that's really amazing. Just listening to you, I was transported back to those pristine surroundings of FRI in Dehradun. And I guess Dehradun itself has many, many firsts and charms. And I think since my previous background was from the armed forces, one of our most, important institutions where we do nation building and, developing our youth, the Indian Military Academy is there. And then I loved the part where you actually spoke about curiosity. I think that is one element, one characteristic which can really impact the way you approach life, approach work, approach everything. So fascinating story, Dobi. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to you. I think one element we've really left out is that that particular time of your life when you actually were a part of India's one of the most premier technology institutes, very close to where our head office is today. But could you throw some light about your years at IIT Kanpur? I mean, that would be really nice.
So, I passed out in 2002, so I did my engineering. So, okay, in a lot of Indian households, you don't have too many options.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
Especially if you are Gen X.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And then when your elder brother is an engineer, right? So it was quite obvious that, you have to match, right? And it was not that you have to match. There was an expectation that, the family should be balanced. So it was a motivation, and of course, like I said, the only discussion that used to happen in our house all the time was, so and so's son did this, he cracked AS, he did that, and very ingrained, because that's how the setup of FRI was,
Yes.
right? There were no business families, there was nothing. And it was a closed community in that sense, right? And Indian Forest Service officials used to train there, and IMA was next door. So you had all this happening all through your formative years, right in front of your eyes, right? So what happened is, engineering was like, okay, I'll do something, and then that's how engineering was. Was I like, did I ever think that there was something else that I had to do? No. It was not that people were talking about that, we'll take commerce, we'll do this. So we have to do engineering, finish. I had no clue what an engineering is about, right? My brother passed out, he came back, and then he was doing, no, least bothered, I have to do engineering, right? Now, once you do engineering, and if you were in 2002, you would know the market scene was not good. So my brother gave me one bit of advice. Boss, you have done your engineering, now you have a couple of options. So once you go to job, you start getting money being in your bank account every month, you'll not study next. I said, boss, go to IIT. I said, go on, who will do it? And all that. I said, do it. And again, the market was not good. I said, okay, so I still remember those months for the gate examination and preparation, and that's how I got into IIT. What you learned at IIT, different people learn different things, right? So I am not the scholar types, to be honest, right? What I learned in IIT is a couple of things. One is that whole system, there is no attendance. Nobody talks about it. There's no attendance, so you're not really required to go to college. But you get infinite internet right in your room, right? And coming from the background where, we were rooted, you didn't have a lot of resources. Again, same story, Now when you get into an ecosystem like that, what you learn? What you learn is, okay, if it's not compulsory to go to college, you have internet, you learn different things, right? So what we learned is, if there is a problem, and if you can find a solution on internet, that means somebody has solved it. You can of course solve it. And if you have found a problem which nobody has solved it and it's not on internet, then even if you fail, it doesn't matter. It's worth giving a shot. So if I really have to, put my all of that experience, it goes out to one link. It really opened up your mind that, ho jayega, yeah, there is some way or the other, you'll figure it out. I think once you reach that, figure it out, and your question that, how you will do it, what you will do it, becomes consequential. So you get that confidence, because I was an engineer. The first course was management and accounting. You put an engineer through it, what will happen? Because I was doing industrial and management engineering. Fantabulous experience, You were clueless, you have no idea, and they were exposing you to things which really matter, all interesting thing, operation research, marketing, this, that. So fantabulous experience. You fail every day in that sense, right? And still you are on your, let's see how we'll figure it out. I think that also is an interesting thing. So if I was to talk about beautiful library, your scholarship, you get 5,000 every month. So, it's oh man, it was heaven. I've never enjoyed, anything more in my life than the scholarship, right? We were writing check back those days. And then this fact that, it really opens up your mind. Because nothing is, which can't be solved. So either it's a great problem that you must attempt, or, if it is something that somebody has solved it, then it's a solved problem.
True.
I think that's what I remember about IIT. And if I have to go back to my engineering days, what I learned there is that, there are exams which need to be passed. And then this is a constraint, right? Which has to be honored. And then whatever you do doesn't matter. So again, there also, I had friends across the spectrum, people who were like far better, toppers and everything. And on the other side, I was friends with people who were struggling to complete their degrees, and I was chillaxed. 30 days in a month, I was, 28 days in a month, I was with the other group, and then 2 days when it mattered, no, I had like night outs to just figure out the code, and then in the morning deliver. Amazing days, and I think those years really also contributed and shaped up a lot of, since you ask now, when I look back, those years really contributed to the years to come later and the whole journey and everything. But yeah, amazing.
You're right, Dobi. Actually, there's no doubt. I mean, the experience that you go through in college or while doing your degree actually changes you for life. People keep discussing this part that, education 4.0 is not matching with industry 4.0. But like I think we had this conversation 2 days back also. The fact of that, it's just not the theoretical experience. It is about how do you approach the problem of, something which is 4 years away. Mm-hmm. How do you plan it and things like that. So I guess answered with a lot of humility. Just being an alumnus of IIT Kanpur, ladies and gentlemen, is something special, and therefore I wanted to bring that little element in it. So let's move on to your.
By the way, sorry, I'm interrupting,
please.
but I also met my wife Vidhi in my engineering college. So though we didn't get started when we should have, we would have saved 10 years, but that's also something which happened during that phase. So
yeah, that's I think a monumental development, Dobi.
You'll have to ask her also whether she feels it's monumental or not, but at least for me, I've been really blessed to have her in my life.
That's really gracious of you, and I'm sure she, feels the same way about you. And that meeting there during your engineering must have been a very interesting phase. Let's move on now. I think once we've got a baseline, like I said, data about who we are and what we've gone through, I think it's time now to move on to your professional life and your professional experiences. I understand that you've worked all over the world. You've worked in Singapore, you worked in Germany, and I think we keep having those conversations every now and then. But the thing is, that working for someone else and having an entrepreneurial bent of mind and setting up your own thing, they're two vastly different things. You have to have certain qualities. You have to have a different way of thinking to take on a project like this. So I just wanted to ask you, and for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, how did this transition take place of, working for almost 8 to 10 years, if I'm not wrong, and then coming into this 2013 when LUMIQ was born? So really excited to hear about that.
Let me ask you a question. Imagine if you have never tasted lemon in your life.
Yeah.
Right? And then somebody asks you that, whether the taste of lemon, which is sour, is better or sweet is better. How would you pick up? You can't, right? So, like I said, I passed out in 2004, and Shoaib was the first mentor I started working with. So, and by the way, that was the early years, and that's how the first startup also came along and everything, right? So my references were not set. So I don't know what a balanced job is, or what a job is for that matter, because even in those years the focus was very clear, right? This is what we have to do, and we have to do it. We'll figure out, right? And with Shoaib being around, that it never sounded like a job, even the first few years, right? Very focused, very motivated, small set of people trying to do something big. Then, of course, the first startup happened. So whatever we had learned, it grounded even further, right? It didn't. And back those days, it was not even called a startup. It was called like you have a company, no, because there was no VC money, there was nothing. So that was what 2006, right? So there was no grounding in a job as such, right? So baptism by fire, we jumped in, right? Then 2008, when we moved out of that startup and, Ashok went to US and then I came back to India, I was part of small setups, right? I want to see how the world operates. There was Swadesh movie had just come out. One of those people who really liked that movie and did something also. I came back. But anyways, what happened is, then I went into the job scene, right? And I'll not name, but I went to one of the pillars of Indian economy, right? In that sense, one of the largest conglomerates in IT. And to be honest, my experience of a job was that, okay, I could do 3 such jobs in a day.
Wow.
Not just 1, 3, because that's where we had come from, not just in terms of thinking, and of course, they have their own setup, because when you have 100,000 people, you need process, mechanism, everything, right? But then we had come from a world where you could move things and move fast and do everything and blessed to work with customers. That was the grounding I had. So there was no sense of balance. Even I don't have a sense of balance. I have a sense of passion, right? So that is how, thing happened. So it didn't matter whether you were doing a job. That was a constant struggle. Then I was lucky to work with, another organization, I2 Technologies, which had a kind of 400, 600 people in that range. But they had more of a startup kind of a culture. So I worked there for some time, got exposed to multiple geographies, consulting and everything, right? So even there, I was a functional guy who understood business, but who had a grasp on tech and everything. But there was no reference of a balanced job. So for me, it's that story that if you have never tested a lemon, what will you do? I'm still the same guy, right? So if I was doing a job, I think I would still be doing it this way only. Otherwise, I'll get frustrated if I'm not able to move things, and if I'm not able to, because that why, right? You see, when you look at that through that lens, that's how you see everywhere. Been blessed, and of course, Shoaib's mentorship, and in that sense, he has been a big drive, and I've been lucky to get associated with him, to be on this journey. Now we've completed 10 years for this and 20 years with it. So I've spent more time than with anyone else in my whole life, not just professional. So, and that has been the story. So it was never a question that you're starting something. You were perpetually running something. So that's how it happened. So I can't really make a comparison in my mind. It's the same. And it's a framework, right? And that's the challenge also, actually. Even when you're operating in a space where you are doing something outside your sphere of influence, let's say you're at home, you're trying to do something, you look at it from a same perspective, right? So everything is and that's a joke that goes in my household also, that you're trying to solve problems everywhere. So that's how I see it. So I think job or no job, startup, no startup, LUMIQ, no LUMIQ, I think that's how you get groomed. And lucky to have worked with some of the sharpest minds and the best of mentors that way to bring that up. So I didn't really start. It was in a way accidental, and in a way an opportunity where I would say I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and then that's how it went.
I think you highlighted some very key elements in our conversation just now. I think first thing that really stood out for me is to say that I really didn't start up anything. This is the way I was, this is the passion, and this is the culture that you had worked it, whether you were in a fixed environment or where you had to set it up. So that's one very important point. Second thing I think which you did mention was about passion. I think I mentioned it 30 seconds ago. But it's something which yesterday I heard somewhere. Does he go to work, or does he actually go and do his passion? Does Sachin Tendulkar, when he goes to the field every day, is he going to work, or he's just following his passion? So I guess that is one singular element which can differentiate between work and feeling completely with your body, mind and soul about something that you want to do with your life. So that's great. And the third part, which is very interesting, is the 20 years that you've spent with Shoaib. And since I come from a background where 20 years is a very significant figure, because it's called pensionable service, and therefore Shoaib
should pay me a pension now.
Start paying you a pension.
Let me tell you a story, since you brought it up. So we were in Singapore, right? That was where our first startup was, and on the Orchard Road, that corner, there is a nice Oriental building, and Tang used to be a guest. We were sitting there, and then there used to be nice sports cars parked there, and we were waiting for a cab. And I said, Shoaib, that car is nice. And he said, I think this must be 2007 types. Then he said, it's a nice car. it was yellow or something. He said, the red one is better. I said, then you got to get me a red one. So I'm still going to ask him for the same thing. I think it was a Ferrari or something. Yeah. So you said pensionable. That's the pension that I'm waiting for.
Yes, of course, you may find it a bit challenging to drive a Ferrari in Delhi NCR, but I still like you go for your bike rides to Agra sometimes. Yes, of course, you can.
Yeah, now it's even difficult to get inside. Some days back, he was sending one clip where, this gentleman in his 50s or 60s is trying to get into a McLaren and struggling.
Yes, of course, that can be a significant challenge.
No, but if I were to look back, right, and the people who have shaped me into, who I am today, without a doubt, he'll be in the, top list of those people. So, hugely, this thing. Amazing,
Yes, I guess, the fact that we bought in the mentor-mentee framework into LUMIQ now, and we are, I guess there'll be many such partnerships in our young minds where probably they'll find their mentor who will probably, change the course of their lives. So that's great. Dobi, thank you for sharing these very, very interesting insights. I'm still with the founding of the company and spending 10 years. I was very fortunate to actually join LUMIQ just before our 10th anniversary. 1st of June it was last year, and how these 10 months have flown I myself don't know. So it's passion.
I hope it was a good ride.
The fact is that you're getting ready every day to come as soon as possible to office so that you can start work. I guess I'm probably getting into the messy and looker mode, which, coming from such a diverse background. But like I said, it's not about me today. So, staying with this theme, in these 10 years, some of our LUMIQers, as we call them, may become entrepreneurs at some stage, 5 years, 10 years from now. So, what do you think, Dobi? What are those 3 qualities or 3 core values which you think are most critical to have a founding mindset? So if you could, just crystallize these things into 3 things, I'm sure our viewers and listeners, many of them who are young and who had aspirations and dreams, would be able to kind of take these nuggets of wisdom.
That's an important question, right? So if I were to look back and identify 3 things, right? So I think the first and foremost in my mind would be why. Right? Pursuing that why is very troublesome. You can't sleep with a why. When you have a why in your mind, you question everything. When you question, as humans, even if you are questioning a process, there are people who are running that process. In their minds, you are questioning them. You are questioning status quo. You are questioning people who have never been questioned. Right? You are questioning everything under the sun. Right? So, and that sometimes can be tricky, right? But if you let go of your why, your curiosity is gone. And then, in my mind, you have very limited room to. And the sad part of it is this happens at home also. So you would know what it means, right?
Yes, of course.
Because essentially, you can't be 2-3 individuals. At least I can't be. I'm just one individual who's the same everywhere. So I think the first and foremost in my mind is why, because that leads to curiosity, that leads to thinking about possibility, that leads to a different way, a different situation, scenario, and that in my mind leads to many things, innovation, blah blah blah, and so on, right? So the why. If I have to identify one thing, I think it would be a why. Second is, I think startups have become cool, but what people don't talk about is the uncertainty.
Yes.
Right? And I'm not talking about uncertainty about just financial or uncertainty about your ideas not working out, or uncertainty. Every day has its own share of uncertainty. Because, see, look at it this way. When your startup is small, you have a different kind of a problem. When you are in a different phase, when you're 0 to 50, you have something to solve. When you are at seed stage, you have an idea to work on, and you work on those ideas some of it. So there is uncertainty all along the way, right? Now the problem with our minds is when just handling that uncertainty is a huge emotional thing, right? And I have aged handling that uncertainty. I'm not good at handling it, right? But I can see that it is one of those reasons because you are trying to settle it somewhere, right? Okay, You have to make a conscious effort to settle that. So one is the why, second is that ability to, embrace uncertainty and still take decisions. Right? Because, and the third and foremost is when you put these two things together, action bias. And action bias not from a perspective that you have to do things, but do it in a manner so that you have the time to fix it when it goes wrong. See, okay, when you have uncertainty, when you are trying to do something, which is not the norm, and if you don't have action bias, you will ponder a lot. And when you ponder a lot, the opportunity itself will get missed. You have to take calls. So that is another critical thing, right? Having that action bias, being able to make those changes at the right time, and having that in the back of your mind that if I do it fast, even if I do a mistake, right, I'm taking calculators, I have time to change things and redo it again. I think if you're able to manage these three things, everything else can be worked around it. And I'm not talking about the business value creation and all that fancy stuff, right? Because that's also important, the financial metrics, whether you're trying to solve the right problem or the wrong problem. We also had our own fair share of doing things which didn't materialize well and everything. Even today, when I look back and I see 10 years we have only reached here. It's too slow, right? So, but I think those are the three qualities in my mind. The curiosity of the mind, the why. The second is, embracing this uncertainty, right? And absorbing it, figuring out a way to work with it. And third thing, like I said, is this action bias, more from taking those risks, calculations, and because once you have taken a risk, right, put it aside that I have taken a risk, because otherwise, it will keep on burning you. And then you will not end up being executing what you have to execute. So those are the two things. And we all make mistakes. We will make mistakes. That's the whole part, right? So those are the three critical qualities which I believe can make an impact.
Yeah, I think you really, in a nutshell, kind of crystallized and, brought in the three most important aspects. And I think I particularly empathize and my mind goes to the third part a lot, the action bias, and the ability to take action with limited data points, because you really don't know how things are going to unfold. But if you continue waiting for all the data points to come and then you're going to analyze, do a SWOT analysis, and then you go and take a decision, probably I think time will pass you by. And so the three things that you mentioned was why. You mentioned the ability to embrace uncertainty, and I guess that probably the speed at which things are changing, and the things at which, something which was certain last night, next morning you come, it's become uncertain. You don't know how it's going to play out, and therefore you should be able to be agile and flexible in handling that. And of course the third part, action bias, I totally agree with you. It's only when you do something will you realize that it has an impact. In the Navy we used to say that if you want to be safe, why don't you drive a desk and not a ship? So unless if something moves, then only you will come to know that something has happened. So that's really wonderful.